Ms. Watts, are you there? Sorry for the delay, I'm just going to get her on now. All stand. The Coronial Court now stands resumed. Please be seated. Yes, Ms. Wild.
Thank you, Nurse Watts. My name is Beth Wild. I'm a lawyer for NARJA, which is Aboriginal Legal Aid of the Northern Territory, and I've got just a couple of questions for you. You have agreed with counsel assisting that it may have only been your perception that nurses were being targeted. Is that correct?
Yes.
You've acknowledged that the schools, the two shops, the council, the daycare, and I think the mechanics had been broken into. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, not all those places are occupied. They're not dwelling houses, are they?
No.
And in fact, they may be places where there's items of value such as food or computers, phones or money are kept. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So would you agree that it was perhaps property that was being targeted?
Yes.
And the teachers' houses were also broken into. Is that right?
Yes.
Are you aware if the teachers ever withdrew as a result of their houses being broken into?
No.
And you've agreed today that it was that you believed it was kids or young teenagers that were responsible for the break-ins?
Yes.
You've said in your affidavit that initially I was freaked out by kids getting into my yard. However, with time I began to grow accustomed to it.
Yes.
And you're not aware of any personal violence that had occurred while the kids or young teenagers were doing the break-ins, is that correct?
Yes.
And you've said you don't even bother to get up because you know they're wrecking something or doing something, but by the time you get up and open the door, they'll run off.
Yes.
You have said that you had normalised the break-ins at Yuendamu.
Yes.
That had you been broken into in your own house, so in town presumably, then you would have been terrified.
No. Well, I think in your own house. Well, you know, that was my home where I lived, so it was my home, and I lived there with my son, so it was my home. And but yeah, I did normalise it, I guess.
You lived in this community for about 3.5 years before, or in total, sorry.
Yeah, I think it was nearly 4 years, yeah.
Okay. And you knew most people in the community?
Yes, yes I did.
You had a good relationship with most of those people?
Yes, I felt I did.
And you've said today that on the whole it was a really positive experience.
Yeah, I loved living there and I loved my job.
You've said that you grew accustomed to it, to kids being in your yard, as you've said.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like you to think about it for a moment. Did you grow accustomed to it because your concerns were lessened, because you knew what you were dealing with, and that is kids targeting property who readily ran away when confronted?
Yes, and I also felt that I was safe in my home.
Yes.
I had good security.
So whereas if you're broken into in a much bigger town, then you're dealing with a completely unknown quantity, aren't you?
Yes, I guess so, yeah.
So when you say you've normalised the break-ins, it's because you've in fact realised that the threat and the danger being posed was in fact minimal.
Yes.
I'll turn to another topic now, Nurse Watts. When you spoke to Helen Gill on the 9th of the 11th during the day, it was your understanding that it was effectively a one-in, all-in decision to be made in relation to the evacuation. Is that right?
Yes.
Cassie had in fact wanted to stay, but she wasn't permitted to stay alone. Is that correct?
Yes.
So when you went after having spoken initially to Helen Gill when the idea was first floated about the evacuation, you then had a discussion to reach a unanimous verdict, if you like.
Yes.
And it wasn't your understanding, for example, that 2 people could be left in the community. Is that right?
I didn't know that there was 2 people could be left in the community. I didn't know. I don't recall that.
But the reason that Cassie couldn't stay by herself is because she needed to have 2 people. She needed another person there if there was to be a call out attended to. Is that right?
Yes. Oh, I don't understand why. I think because Cassie was initially wanting to go, and then it was the very last minute that she said she would stay. So that wasn't a decision that was carried on throughout the day that she was always not going to go. It was only a last minute decision that she said, well, I'll stay. So that wasn't how it was throughout the whole proceeding.
Okay. But the reason she couldn't stay by herself is because that would be contrary to policy to be attending a call out by herself. Is that right?
Yes, you have to have 2 people
Yes.
for a call out. Yeah.
So if 2 people stayed behind, then that would be fine in terms of that policy. Is that correct?
Yes.
But it wasn't your understanding that 2 people could be left behind?
No, I didn't. I thought that if we were, I felt that my understanding was that we all left or we all stayed.
And you don't recall a discussion about 2 people being deployed to ULM instead of coming back into town?
No.
I'm going to turn to another topic again, Nurse Watts, and this is the final one. In your initial interview with police, I don't think we could have saved him with his injuries. Do you remember saying that to the police?
Yes.
Yes, and by him we mean Kumanjayi Walker.
Yes.
Now, have you read the statement of Professor Michael Reid, who's provided a report evaluating the provision of medical services to Kumanjayi Walker?
No, I haven't.
All right, just for your information, he made an evaluation as to the possibility of his survival. Were medical services available? So you haven't read that?
No, I haven't.
But it's your belief that you couldn't have saved Kumanjayi Walker given his injuries?
Well, I can't say that I couldn't have saved him because I don't. All I know is that he was shot 3 times in the chest. I've never been involved in a gunshot wound with anybody in my whole nursing career, and And I can't honestly say that we couldn't have saved him. You know, I said that, but I didn't. That was under the thought that he'd been shot 3 times in the chest, and I felt that that he possibly couldn't have survived that. But I don't know that for sure because I haven't read any reports or the report that you've just mentioned.
Okay. So the basis of your assertion that you don't think you could have saved him was that he'd suffered 3 gunshot wounds?
Yeah, to the chest.
Yes. And anything else informing that opinion?
Or just the lack of equipment that we have at the clinic. We're not an emergency trauma unit. We're just a clinic. We don't have, we don't have trauma gear or, things like that.
Okay. Thank you, nurse. No further questions for me.
Any other questions? Mr. Hutton.
Just a couple of minutes, Your Honour, thank you. Miss Watts, I'm Tom Hutton, as you know.
Hi, Tom.
Hi. Hi, Vanessa. Prior to the withdrawal of staff on 9 November, were you aware that there had been an incident involving a community member running at police officers with an axe?
Yes, I think I was, but I didn't know who it was.
All right. Do you recall how you became aware of that incident?
I'm not sure. I may have been when I was speaking to with the police that Friday night, or may have been just general talk in the community. I can't honestly recall how I knew that.
All right.
And I may have even found out about that after the fact as well, because I can't remember how I found out about that, but I do know that.
All right, thank you. But you're not sure whether it was before or after?
No.
All right. On an unrelated topic then, you were asked by Mr. Mullins during his questions whether you had a poor view of Warlpiri people, is how I recall the question. Do you remember that question?
Yeah, I do. That really upset me, that question. I'm offended by that question.
Why is that?
Because I don't have a poor view of the community. I lived there and I worked there for nearly 4 years. I lived there with my little boy. I loved the community members. I loved working. I loved my job. My little boy loved living there. I was happy there, and I certainly do not have a poor view of the community. I have really fond memories of living there and working there.
Yes, it's fair to say you wouldn't choose to live in a community of Warlpiri people if you did have a poor view of Warlpiri people.
Well, I don't know why anybody would live anywhere where they have a poor view of anybody. I certainly don't have a poor view of it. I like I say, the whole. I lived there, and it was my home there, and my little boy went to kindy and school there, and it was a very happy experience for me. And I certainly don't have a poor view of the community or the Warlpiri people. I totally respect them.
Yes, thank you. No further questions, John.
Nothing else. Thank you for making yourself available to give evidence, very important evidence for the inquest, particularly while you're away. I really appreciate you making the time and providing such considered responses in your evidence today, and we'll certainly take it on board and think about all of the information that you've provided.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, we'll break the link now, and just before we adjourn for the day, is there anything else for today? Then we can adjourn till 9:30 tomorrow.
All stand. Coronial Court now stands adjourned.
means.